Well, good morning. Fine to see all of you here this morning. Um, we've got handouts coming around. Unless he runs out, if you don't get one, raise your paw and he'll help you out. We are in Joshua chapter 21 this morning. If you want to turn there, if I put up our outline of the book, this is the last allotment of land in the book. And it happens to be the tribe of Levi, or the Levites, and land. I maybe shouldn't have said land, because what they actually get, well, cities and their pasture land. So the village itself and then land around it. It never says how far. I'm sure it varied a lot from town to town. It's a fairly long chapter, 45 verses, and I'm gonna breeze through parts of it. Not sure that I actually want to read it verbatim with you this morning. We've been through a lot of city lists in the past, and most of these, neither one of us have no idea where they're at, and sometimes we even have trouble pronouncing the name. So, but there is some really fun stuff in this chapter too, a little bit of which I'm going to draw from some other books. So let's jump in here. Joshua chapter 21, starting with verse 1. Then the heads of households of the Levites approached Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the households of the tribes of the sons of Israel. And they spoke to them at Shiloh in the land of Canaan, saying, pause button for just a second. Why Shiloh? That's where the tabernacle is. Yep, good. Saying, in verse 2, the Lord commanded through Moses to give us cities to live in, with their pasture lands for our cattle. So the sons of Israel gave the Levites from their inheritance, from the inheritance of the tribes, these cities with their pasture lands, according to the command of the Lord. So the lot came out for the families of the Kohathites. I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about some of these tribal names. And the sons of Aaron the priest, who were of the Levites, received 13 cities by lot from the tribe of Judah and from the tribe of the Simeonites and from the tribe of Benjamin. And the rest of the sons of Kohath received 10 cities by lot from the families of the tribe of Ephraim and from the tribe of Dan and from the half-tribe of Manasseh. Verse 6, the sons of Gershon received 13 cities by lot from the families of the tribe of Issachar, from the tribe of Asher, from the tribe of Naphtali, and from the half-tribe of Manasseh in Bashan. Verse 7, the sons of Merari, according to their families, received 12 cities from the tribe of Reuben and from the tribe of Gad and from the tribe of Zebulun. And we'll end with verse 8. Now the sons of Israel gave by lot to the Levites these cities with their pasture lands, as the Lord had commanded through Moses. Okay, you've got a little bitty version of this on your handout, on the backside, upper left corner. So Levi, the son of Jacob, or Israel, one of the sons, had 3 boys, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And so we see all 3 of those as clans. Is that the right word? In this section. So when land is divided among the descendants of Levi, so the tribe of Levi, if you will, we have 3 major clans And we all actually have a fourth here, and those are the sons of Aaron. Now, we know that Aaron's father's name was Amram, and Aaron's brother was Moses. But there's quite a gap between Amram and Kohath. Kohath would have been at the beginning of the sojourn in Egypt, and Amram would have been at the end several centuries later. So this little family tree here is leaving out a whole bunch of generations between those two. Interestingly enough, Aaron has a son, Eleazar, and he's mentioned here in this section. You may have caught that. He's the high priest at this point. And then Eleazar had a son named Phinehas, who's going to be one of the key characters in the next chapter. But you have to wait 2 weeks, unless you read ahead. It probably makes good sense to you why we would have Gershon, Kohath, and Merari as clans given here. Why do we have Aaron as a subset of the Kohathites who is given his own special land? Or what makes him unique? He was the high priest, the first high priest. And from him, all of the high priests descended, at least down to Eli. Is it because the Levites and the priests have different functions? In a sense, yes. In fact, that's part of what I want to look at with you next. As I understand it, any Levite could be a priest. You know, they rotated. I'm willing to be shown wrong. You're skeptical. Okay. I'm working off the cuff, so you could be right, Tricia. But certainly the high priesthood, and then the priestly line came from Aaron. But these other three clans, well, the non-Aaron Kohathites and then the clans of Gershon and Merari had their own responsibilities around the tabernacle, particularly when they were traveling in the wilderness for 4 decades. Let me begin with the way that camp was laid out in the wilderness. You familiar with the tribes being arranged around the tabernacle, with the tabernacle in the center. And on the innermost part of those rings or quadrants were the Levites. So the tabernacle faced to the east. Sorry, I'm looking at my picture on the back wall, and I always do what would be in reverse for you. The tabernacle faced to the east, and the Merarites, the Gershonites, and the Kohathites were on the sides and back. The descendants of Aaron were in front, along with Moses. I see that hand. Did Caiaphas trace back to Aaron? I'm uncertain about that. He should have. But we've got this weird thing going on in the intertestamental period with the Maccabees where stuff gets all out of kilter. And I couldn't tell you off the cuff if Caiaphas claimed to trace his lineage back to them. He should have. Good question. We also know, and I believe I've got this, yes, I've got this on your handout, up at the top, Kohath, the clan of Kohath, In the desert, their duty was to transport by hand the most sacred paraphernalia. You like that word? Good. Well, no, that's too long to use in Scrabble, isn't it? Unless you got somebody else's. Okay, anyway. The ark, the table, showbread, the candelabra, the altars, the little laver, wash your hands thing. So on the picture that you've got below this, you can see those 6 items covered, ready to be transported. Let me give you a little different picture up here. And that was the first thing that happened, was that those items would be covered. Sorry, when did that happen, Kris? Whenever the tabernacle was going to be transported. The first thing that would happen is that the priest would go in and cover these items of furniture, and then the Kohathites would carry them out, and they would lead the procession when the tabernacle moved, and then the tribes, of course, would follow. If you're curious, you can read about this in much more detail in Numbers, especially chapters 3 and 4. Our second group is the Gershonites, and they were entrusted with 2 wagons. We read about that in Numbers 7 and verse 7. And they transported the textile and the skin components of the tabernacle. So what? Fabrics? I don't know, skin's not really fabric, but the coverings. I pulled these pictures from a guy, and I can't remember his name now, Alex, somebody, that put together what I consider to be a tremendous set of 3D illustrations of the Israelites taking down the tabernacle piece by piece as described in Numbers and transporting it. When I was a kid, I don't know if I was never told or if it just never stuck, I never thought of the Israelites as using wagons to transport. But it's right in the text. If you go look at it there in Number 7, they had 6 wagons, and 2 of them were given to the Gershonites to transport fabric and skin things. And he has suggested here that they must have had some kind of, when you look at the size of the fabrics that covered the tabernacle, they were really big. Some of them were broken into 2 parts, but a lot of material. And so he suggests they probably had some kind of platform that they could actually lay these out before they started folding and rolling, keep them off the dust and the dirt. And given how expensive some of those seem to be, I think it's a decent, logical conclusion. Do those wagons look really long to you? They do to me as well. The reason he has reconstructed them as being, I think of a cart as basically a square with wheels. But in order to get either some of these rolled up fabrics or some of the other poles and components that we know what their length was, this is about the minimum length that those wagons would have to be, which is kind of interesting. Unless they had some other way of taking stuff apart that we don't know about. Okay, so the Gershonites were second. You can see on the little picture on your handout there on the left-hand side, and the guy that put these reconstructions together goes through piece by piece, separate slides showing you each of those as they come down and are packed into the wagon. And this is just kind of an overview of that. The Merarites used 4 wagons. You can see that in Number 7 and verse 8. And they carried the solid structure of the tabernacle. That included planks, pillars, stands. There were a number of metal bases into which pillars or posts were put, like for around the outside. They used bronze, I think. and silver for the inside of the tabernacle, for the bases into which the planks were set that became the walls. There was a lot of weight there, and a lot of construction material. Wood, much of it overlaid with gold. But they got 4 wagons to transport the solid structure of the tabernacle and that outer courtyard as well. So this is an approximation of what it would have looked like. They're not actually lined up yet, but 4 wagons for the Merarites with all of the solid materials in them, 2 wagons with all the fabrics and the skins, and a few other, piles of rope and other things that were required to put this stuff together, probably some clips and other little hangers and stuff. And then the Kohathites, other than the descendants of Aaron, carried the furniture. And so when they actually traveled, it would have looked something like this. I don't know that the last 4 needed to be abreast of each other, but it shortens up the picture, lets you get a little more on there. So these are the items of the tabernacle when they traveled, and they traveled from time to time, whenever what? Yeah, the pillar of cloud by day or fire by night. Whenever the pillar got up and moved, they started packing and follow it along. So, what happened then? This is just a thought-provoking question because I don't have a good answer. What happened when the tabernacle got set up in Shiloh, its permanent home? Didn't have to move anymore. Yeah. A sale on 6 used wagons. Well used, I might say. Yeah, a little unemployment. Yeah, you can kind of understand why these guys would be assigned cities to go live in. Their services are no longer required for transportation of the tabernacle. Just a couple off-the-cuff thoughts here. We've talked about this before, but it seems like over the centuries, there was some solid structure incorporated into the tabernacle there. We read about things like doors and doorposts. Jewish tradition has it that eventually they built a stone lower, but still had the fabric over it. And then at some point, well, you remember in the days of Eli, they took the ark down to battle with the Philistines, lost the ark, and apparently not long after that, the Philistines came up and sacked Shiloh, but not before the tabernacle and all of its stuff was spirited away. Hauled off, right? Who did that? And how? What did they use to transport? I mean, was it just everybody grab everything you can and 30 guys roll up the skin and get under it and go marching off across the hills before the Philistines get... I don't know. It would be fun to see. It would be sad to see, but it would be interesting to see how that happens. We hear later on of the tabernacle appearing in other places, and eventually the tabernacle is stored in Solomon's temple. The text tells us that at the same time that the Ark of the Covenant was brought in from Jerusalem down by David's palace, they also stored the tabernacle in the temple. So all those materials went in. I suppose they were considered to be sacred. And that's the last that we hear of that. I don't know if they were preserved in an unusual way or if they eventually became moth-eaten and were thrown out or just destroyed when the Temple of Solomon was destroyed. That was a rabbit trail. Thanks for sticking with me. Okay, so on the front of your handout, we could we could pretty much place these 4 names just based on the first 8 verses without any more detail. Let me look at that again with you right quick. In verse 4, the sons of Aaron received 13 cities from the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Simeon, and the tribe of Benjamin. That's right down there in the Promised Land, the southern part of Canaan. Verse 5, the rest of the sons of Kohath, who were not descendants of Aaron, received 10 cities from the tribe of Ephraim, Dan, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. That would be the half-tribe of Manasseh that's west of the Jordan. There's the other half on the eastern side of the Jordan. The sons of Gershon received 13 cities from the families of the tribes of Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and the half-tribe of Manasseh that's in Bashan. So that's clear up in the north, but then also swinging around. I still don't have a way to, this one gets just a little bit complex. These areas up here and the half-tribe of Manasseh that's over here. Merari, well, let's just read it again. Find my place. Verse 7, Joshua 21, verse 7. The sons of Merari, according to their families, received 12 cities from the tribe of Reuben, from the tribe of Gad, and from the tribe of Zebulun. That one is not intuitive to me. But we've got Reuben in the south, Gad right here, and Zebulun is up in this area. I'm not sure if I understand completely why that division. That's what it is. Oh, sure. We had, so the descendants of Aaron, Judah, Simeon, which was inside of Judah, and Benjamin. And then we had for the Kohathites, Ephraim, Dan, and the other half of Manasseh. So it's basically right where that word Kohath is the western half of Manasseh. Were these cities still inhabited when they were given to the Levites, or were they conquered, emptied, and just waiting for new residents? I'm convinced it was a mixed bag, because we have, if we went through all these cities in detail and traced each one down, we would find some cities that were never taken by the Israelites. When I say never, that's assuming that, like in the days of Solomon, when his kingdom is just huge, how do I put this? He owns, has influence over, has control over large areas of non-Israelite population. So the Philistines could not stand against him, Solomon. But that also doesn't mean that because he took it over, he kicked all the Philistines out and replaced them with Israelites. And I think that's kind of what's behind my statement, that there are a number of cities that were never inhabited by Israelites, even though they were assigned. I could give you an easy off-the-cuff example. The city of Tyre that was assigned to, that's Asher, if I recollect. Well, even in the days of Solomon, we have a local Canaanite king, Hiram, that rules that city and a bunch of the area around it. And they make a deal, and he gets cedar wood from him and stuff. But the city was never taken, even in Solomon's day. Yes, it was assigned to, am I right, Asher? Does somebody have the tribal map from last time? I think it's Asher along the coast, and then Naphtali further in Galilee. Yeah, it was assigned to Asher, but was never taken. And so I'm convinced we have a number of those with the Levitical cities too. And my opinion is that the Levites were given the deed, if you will, to more cities than they could actually inhabit at that time. But it's a little bit like the land rush or something else like that in our own recent history, where you go plot your stakes, and this is my land. Well, I may not break up more than half of it the first year, and I may get swamped, and that's all I can do for 10 years, but I've got the whole thing. I've got my stakes in, it's mine, even if I'm not using all of it right now. Maybe a weak analogy, but that's how I'd view at least some of this. The Israelites had been granted the area, granted the cities, but they didn't actually, and some of it they took gradually over time. Right, we really don't. And there's a fair number where we can't put a pin on a map. We know the approximate region because of the names around it, but Jerusalem, it's right in the heart of the Israelite territory. And it was Canaanite until the days of David. So 4 centuries of in the heart of Israelite territory, a Canaanite city, inhabited by Canaanites, Jebusites, if you will, the city of Jebus. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag. But, I mean, God told them too, I'll push these people out slowly so that they don't just become infested with weeds and overgrown and wild animals and all this kind of stuff. You're a growing people, and I've made provision for that. You're not going to inhabit the whole land all at once. Then when you grow, where do you go? So, good question. We're doing okay. Interestingly enough, if we were to read through each of these detailed descriptions, we would discover that the Levites are given all 6 cities of refuge. Each of the cities of refuge is assigned to the Levites as one of their cities. Aaron gets the city of Hebron. The Kohathites get Shechem. Gershon gets 2, Kadesh, which is clear up in the north, above the Sea of Galilee even, and Golan, which is over on the eastern side. Merari gets Bezer, which is way down south on your map, and Remote Gilead, which is a little further north. I see that hand. Merari, a clan. Uh-huh. You can call them the Merarites if you want. Uh-huh. So yeah, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, 3 sons of Levi, and each the father of a larger clan. Aaron, a descendant of the Kohathites. I got a couple of questions for you here. One is, why is it that the Levites were not given land? And this is a question that the text actually answers a number of times. God was their inheritance. Another way you could say it, their service at the tabernacle was their land. They were special to God, and so he said, you don't get land, you get me. Yeah. They had cities in the lands around them. So let me ask you 2 questions here. Um, First of all, why did God give the Levites the cities of refuge? Okay. Okay. Yeah, they weren't part of the tribe in which the city existed, so perhaps a little more even-handed. Tell me a little more. You said they were kind of the officials. In what sense? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Set up to be the judges. Mm-hmm. Yeah, officials for disputes, kind of judges in a sense. Yeah. Well, you would expect that they would have known the rules better than anybody. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That that kind of ties into my second question. Um, why did God spread the Levites throughout the land? And I didn't give you a map with thumbtacks everywhere one of these cities was, but you can see just with the regions they're assigned, you can see how they're just kind of spread all over. Okay, missionaries, yeah, they were to be the teachers of the alphabet. Yeah, the law, and perhaps the alphabet too. Um, it's amazing the evidence we have that a lot of Israelites were literate. That's very unusual in this period. But we've got both in the text. My favorite example is the kid in the book of Judges when Gideon takes off after whoever those guys were off to the east, chases him. There's a city that refuses to give him any kind of aid. And so he says, when I come back, I'm going to destroy this city. And when he comes back, he finds a kid out in the field and says, write down for me the names of the elders of the city. We don't think anything about that because we're all taught the alphabet in kindergarten or first grade in my case. And we all know how to read and write. We just assume it. That wasn't the case back then. But he finds a random kid out in the field, and this kid is able to write down 70 names. I think it says something about literacy in their culture. Question? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It doesn't work to have all of the knowledge in one tight little place, does it? If you want. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Washington, D.C. is a bubble that we want to contain. You with me on that? Okay. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, it could be tactical. Or you have an epidemic come through and, sorry, there went the tribe of Levi. They were all living within 3 towns. I just wanted to read a couple of passages here for you that support this. Out of Deuteronomy 33, of Levi, he said, let your Thummim and your Urim, those were, we think, a couple of stones that were used by God to communicate his will on occasion. Let those belong to your godly men, whom you proved at Massah, with whom you contended at the waters of Meribah. A bunch of history in there out of the Exodus and wanderings. Who said of his father and mother, I did not consider them, and he did not acknowledge his brothers, nor did he regard his own sons, for they observed your word and kept your covenant. So in the context, what that means is they were more concerned about obeying God than their relationships, familial, well, it's my dad that's rebelling, so kind of got to let that one go. No, they did not consider or acknowledge family in that sense. They were focused in on doing God's word. And then he says in verse 10, they shall teach your ordinances to Jacob and your law to Israel. They shall put incense before you and the whole burnt offerings on your altar. So a specific statement that these guys, the Levites, were to be teachers of the law to the people. And having them spread throughout the land in a variety of cities makes that a whole lot easier to do. Don't have to have the guy on horseback that comes through once a year or whatever. They're living among their student base. In 2 Chronicles 17, verse 7, then in the 3rd year of his reign, Jehoshaphat sent his officials, Ben-Hail, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nathanael, Micaiah, to teach in the cities of Judah, which is actually what their job was. And with them, the Levites, who are named here, Shemaiah, Nethaniah, Zebediah, Asahel, Shemiramoth, Johanathan, Adonijah, Tobijah, and Tobadonijah. Wow. That's a lunker. The Levites. And with them Elishama and Jehoram the priests. They taught in Judah, having the book of the law of the Lord with them, and they went throughout all the cities of Judah and taught among the people. So there's an example of how this is fleshed out. Now this does sound a little more like the circuit rider, but it's the responsibility of these guys to do this. Yes, they had responsibilities at the tabernacle, later the temple, but they also had the responsibility to teach. I think we eventually see this morph into synagogues in the days of Jesus, where they read the law in Jewish cities and talk about it. There's some interesting ways in which Jesus himself was involved in that. Okay, so shall we read through the rest of this chapter? No, not today. But I do want to take you to the end, because we have a beautiful summary I'll start with verse 41, Joshua 21, verse 41. All the cities of the Levites in the midst of the possession of the sons of Israel were 48 cities with their pasture lands. These cities each had its surrounding pasture lands. Thus it was with all these cities. Verse 43. So the Lord gave Israel, and he's not talking just Levi now, he's talking everybody, all the land which he had sworn to give to their fathers. And they possessed it and lived in it. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, according to all that he had sworn to their fathers. And no one of their enemies stood before them. And the Lord gave all their enemies into their hand. Not one of the good promises which the Lord had made to the house of Israel failed. All came to pass. I think you could actually take that as a summary of this entire book. That's where this has been driving. This has been the destination. We began the book with the Israelites in camp on the eastern side of the Jordan, and we're close to ending the book here with the land having been given to the people and all of God's promises fulfilled. in that regard, with regard to the land. I don't know if I could just summarize a couple of items out of here. We have a gift, if you will, the Lord gave to Israel. We have promise fulfilled, everything that he had sworn to them or promised to them. Fascinating, rest on every side. So they got in, they were able to kick out their enemies, they had peace. That's what we all want, right? Just, yeah. And he says, no enemy was able to withstand them. Somebody comes up against them, Israel can whoop them. And of course, it doesn't take a whole lot of times of that happening before word gets around and people are like, okay, we're done. Just let them be. We got our own place. They're not attacking us right now. So, and thus the rest or the peace. In some ways, I think that final verse there, verse 45, is sort of the apex of this entire book, which is a lot of fun to see. We've been through a lot together. They had been through more. It took them longer than what it's taken us. Of course, we got a couple of chapters left here, but God was faithful to them and gave them what he told them he would. We'll see that they're still unfaithful themselves and don't take everything that they should. And unfortunately, this peace lasts about a generation. The younger generation comes along and forget, or we're going to be different, or whatever, and things begin to spiral down. But at this point, you can't look at God and say, well, he never gave us. No, he did. He gave them what he promised them. Any questions? I see that hand. Uh-huh. Caleb, Hebron, Kiriath Arba. I wouldn't put any money on this, but my sense is, I heard that laugh. My sense is that the actual city itself was given to the Levites. It's a city of refuge. Caleb gets, Hebron was a major city. It was a big city, a lot of history there, going back millennia. Patriarchs were buried there. Just sidelight. My sense is that Caleb got, so any city that large would have a bunch of surrounding villages that were, subdivision is the wrong word, that's houses, but it's the word I'm looking for. A suburb, a suburb. And I think that's what Caleb got. I don't know how they worked it out with pasture land. Perhaps the suburbs were far enough out that they could take some pasture land right in that, because these guys had to have flocks and vineyards and olive groves and things like that. So, but that's as close as I can get. It's a great question. I wish I knew more. Because it mentions Caleb. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Next week, Rick is on, first Sunday of the month of November. Can't believe November's here. Christmas is right around the corner. Week after that, we'll do chapter 22 here, Lord willing. So let me close this in a word of prayer. Father, thank you for your word, specifically the book of Joshua as we've been studying it here. It's encouraging to us to see the way in which you followed through on your promise, originally made clear back to Abraham and also to his descendants to give them this land at a time when he only had, beginning with the time when he had no descendants at all. It's fun to see the way that you have provided for him an entire nation of descendants, and then have actually given him this entire land, or given it to them. And once again, we recognize that you have made a variety of promises to us as well, and we can take from this that you will be faithful and you will do what you have said. And we're grateful to have this example. I pray that you would increase our faith. Help us to live in light of this, knowing that you are faithful, that you can and will do what you've said. Help us to be faithful servants, serving you each day in obedience and looking for your quick return. Ask for blessing on the service to come now too. In your name I pray. Amen.